Let's get this thing rolling. It's time to get up here on ESPN. We're ready to go. Graziano is here. I like that suit. Sacho is looking good, fresh off of the inauguration last week, if you will, at Texas. I got a frog in my throat, but it'll go away eventually. And we got much more. Ryan Clark is ready to go today. Ninko's going to hit somebody. David Pollack will join us as we go. We begin with the game of the night because week 3 in the NFL is already underway. Mitch Trubisky and the Steelers visiting the Cleveland Browns, who were 4 days removed from giving a game away against the Jets. Late first quarter. Give it to Nick Chubb. Sacho, that's the recipe for success.
Give it to Nick Chubb all day, every day. Every day of the week that ends in Y, I want Nick Chubb to be running the football. He put up that hype video earlier in the season. Man, this dude's living it up.
He had 113 yards last night. Browns moving the chains, and then it's Jacoby Brissett. His new favorite target is Amari Cooper.
Amari Cooper, and obviously Terrell Edmonds on the defensive side of the ball. He's looking inside. He's backing up. Can't do that at the goal line.
So the Browns take the lead. And then here comes the play they're talking about. Is this the catch of the year?
Catch of the year, play of the game, catch of the century. I mean, like, that's what Odell did. Check out this angle. Yeah. That's Odell.
And if you don't believe me, ask him. Odell was on Twitter last night reacting to it. You tell me if you see a difference between the George Pickens catch and the Odell catch. Spectacular. Steelers continue to drive. Great ball placement, by the way, by Trubisky. Later in the drive, first and goal. Najee Harris takes it home.
Najee Harris showing it's not just Nick Chubb who can do this thing. I can do this thing, too.
But he had just 56 yards rushing. Steelers tie it at 7. Middle of the second, Browns first and goal. Brissett, Njoku.
Edmonds again backing up at the goal line, but great play by Njoku. Great ball placement by the quarterback.
Brissett, 220 yards, 2 touchdowns. Browns miss another extra point. That killed them last week. So it's 13-7 Cleveland. Fourth quarter, Browns up 16-14. Brissett again for Amari Cooper.
Amari Cooper has been such a great addition to this offense. A down the field threat, this second 100-yard game. Cleveland didn't have that last year.
Yeah, good thing the Cowboys got a 5th-round pick for him. And then here's Chubb taking it in on a 4th and goal. Browns take a 23-14 lead. 3 minutes left in the game, same score. Trubisky, his favorite target is Pat Freiermuth.
Especially in the fourth quarter. Pat Freiermuth. Say it with me, Sam Acho. Pat Freiermuth had 2 great catches in the fourth quarter that kept Pittsburgh in this game.
That was the first. Here's the second. Leads to a field goal, so it's 23-17. Under 2 minutes to go. Steelers going for the onside kick. This beat the Browns last week. Oh, look at this. It gets close.
It was perfectly executed. Outside, now, obviously, he was offsides. Pittsburgh was offsides, but, man, Cleveland's got to get that cleaned up.
Browns get the win, 29-17.
I'm not in that mindset. I'm interested in reviewing this tape and looking at the totality of it and figuring out how we collectively get better. So the answer to that question is definitively no.
So there is Mike Tomlin saying he is not thinking of making a quarterback change. Now, whether you blame this on Trubisky or not, the offense has been awful, ranking in the bottom quarter of the league in points, yards, time of possession. Going back to last year, they've scored 20 points or fewer in 4 straight regular season games. That's as long a streak as they have had under Mike Tomlin. Bear in mind, one of those games went the entirety of overtime and they were barely able to score. So let me begin with my favorite former Steeler, Ryan Clark. Mike Tomlin says he's not ready to make a quarterback change. Are you?
You know what? I'm not necessarily ready now, but I'm getting closer. And I think Mike Tomlin is getting closer as well. The one thing about Mike Tomlin or Mike T is that when he makes a decision, it's a definitive decision. And he understands that those plans could be adjusted, but he's going to have check marks that says this is the time. Listen, the defense isn't stopping the run. Offensively, you weren't creating running lanes probably until this week against the Cleveland Browns. And Mitchell Trubisky did push the football down the field. There was a drop down the sideline by Deontay Johnson when Myles Garrett is barreling down on Mitchell Trubisky. He does get out of the pocket, throw the deep ball to George Pickens. And so I don't necessarily know if we can sit back and say this is all because Mitchell Trubisky stinks, right? Matt Canada was the coach last year, and this offense struggled, and we put a lot of that on Ben Roethlisberger. And so I think that going forward, Coach Tomlin will have a time when he's ready to make the change to Kenny Pickett. I believe it's getting closer. I don't necessarily believe that time is now, because the one thing you don't want to do is mortgage your future trying to fix your present.
Nah, that's right. Pickett is the future, but there's a lot of season left in your future as well. Ninko, we talked about this yesterday, about maybe Trubisky playing for his job. How much of what you have seen so far do you put on him?
I put a lot on him, actually. You think about at the big picture. Look at the big picture. Do you see some of the catches his receivers were making last night? Mm-hmm. They were highlight reels. So if he just gives them more of a chance and throws the ball down the field, Give me a 50-50 ball. Let me see what these receivers can do, because you know that they're going to come down with it. And at the end of the day, this game played out exactly the way I thought it was going to. The Browns were going to run the football, take care of the ball, and win the football game. And that's exactly what happened. Chubb runs for 113. Brissett takes care of the football, throws 2 touchdown passes, and the Browns win. Yeah, it was close, but played out exactly the way I thought it would. Trubisky doesn't throw a touchdown pass, doesn't really take any risks, throws the ball up to his big-time receivers. They make big catches. Do that more.
You know, Danny, we've been talking how the bye, the little mini bye that follows a Thursday game might be a logical or reasonable time to consider making a change. It does not sound like Mike Tomlin is ready to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he says definitively no, so we have to take him at his word. Look, history tells us that unless you're Jordan Love, you know, the first-round quarterback's going to play at some point in his rookie year. And I think that's the case with Kenny Pickett. The question is when. It was a great Tomlin quote last week. I was on their Steelers website. They asked him, like, when would you consider major changes? And he said, if we weren't in the right neighborhood. He said, I feel like we're in the right neighborhood, but we're knocking on the wrong doors. So I guess he feels like they're close. But when you watch this, you see a lot of what soured Chicago on Trubisky, which is the inconsistency. Yeah, he can make a great throw, but he can also look kind of lost in the 2-minute drill or when, things are collapsing around him a little bit. So, and then you saw the frustration on the receivers. You saw that clip we showed earlier of Deontay Johnson. You saw George Pickens a couple here. Look at he's on the sideline. He's upset about the way things are going. So if the internal pressure gets to the point where it feels like the switch is necessary, then that might be the kind of thing that spurs it.
Well, look, there's one thing I've learned about wide receivers in the NFL is that they're always open. Just ask them. They're always open. But last night, it certainly feels as though the Steelers receivers are feeling some frustration. At what point does that become something Tomlin has to take into account?
When you keep on losing. I mean, everyone's frustrated when you lose. At the end of the day, if you're winning, it almost doesn't matter. Now, granted, to your point, sometimes, like Pickens said, I'm open 99% of the time. That's what a lot of receivers believe. But when you win games, you have to almost let your ego go to the side for winning purposes. But when you're losing, you're saying, man, what could I do better? What could our team do better? What could our quarterback do better? And that's what we're seeing in Pittsburgh. And so the frustration is going to mount up as long as Pittsburgh continues to lose. Thankfully, they have a winnable game next week with the Jets.
I could live without you
but
saying
then after that,
it's
going to be interesting.
And by the way, if you take a look, I mean, our FPI, for what it's worth, as of this moment, likes the Jets to win that game, and so do I, which is to say I'd love to see it happen. And then you see the schedule is tough after that. That might be one of the things that Tomlin is taking into account before their bye. The schedule does get a little bit rough. So that's the Steelers, at least for this moment. Mike Tomlin says he's not making a quarterback change. On the flip side of this game last night, the Cleveland Browns are one inexcusable collapse, and even I will acknowledge that, from being 3-0 without their quarterback. We all understand what's going on right now with Jacoby Brissett and Deshaun Watson. So I guess, Ryan Clark, for lack of a better way of putting the question, how good are the Cleveland Browns?
The Cleveland Browns are actually a pretty good football team. But the thing is this, too. Because of Deshaun Watson's off-the-field issues and now the suspension, we basically said the Cleveland Browns aren't going to be able to compete at the quarterback position until week 12. Well, guess what? They've actually probably had the quarterback advantage the first 3 weeks of the season. I think if you ask people Baker Mayfield or Jacoby Brissett, they'll go Jacoby Brissett. Obviously, Joe Flacco, no disrespect to him because he played well down the stretch last week. Jacoby Brissett or Joe Flacco, Jacoby Brissett. And last night, you heard what we just said about Mitchell Trubisky. I take Jacoby Brissett over him, and he also outplayed him. And so when you look at the Cleveland